Moments of inspiration mixed with time to network, IBJ Media Events has you covered. From industry deep dives to awards celebrating Indiana's top leaders, see what's coming up and reserve your seat at ibj.com/RSVP.
This is Inside Indiana Business Radio for the afternoon of Friday, September 19th, 2025. I'm Alex Brown. IB Tech Community College, South Bend Elkhart, and Elkhart-based Slate-Up have launched a pilot partnership aimed at connecting students directly with high-demand manufacturing jobs across northern Indiana. Amber Ruskowski with IB Tech says the key piece is helping students understand career pathways and different opportunities that exist with area employers.
Sometimes it can be a little tricky for students to know where to plug in into their next career move or understand what that pathway looks like. So this is a tool that really shows how a student can potentially map their entire career out, how they could potentially upskill, reskill, or branch into new industries or scaffold into higher positions.
The partnership adds a new layer of support by tracking outcomes, providing localized career mapping, and giving employers direct access to students in manufacturing programs. Chris Daly, who joined the American Civil Liberties Union of Indiana as executive director less than 2 years ago, has parted ways with the organization following a mutual decision between Daly and the organization's board of directors. A reason for his departure was not given. The Indianapolis-based organization said legal director Ken Falk and finance and operations director Tara Reed are now jointly serving as interim co-executive directors until a new one is found. For the second consecutive month, Indiana's unemployment rate stayed flat at 3.6% in August. The Indiana Department of Workforce Development said today that the state also added 3,900 private sector jobs last month. From the number one source for Indiana business news, this is Inside Indiana Business Radio.
Thanks for listening to this IBJ Media podcast. You're probably going to remember this ad. Do you know why? Podcast advertising works. 85% of listeners recalled hearing an ad during a podcast, and 70% of podcast listeners have acted after hearing an ad. So whether you're looking to be heard across the entire IBJ Media Podcast Network, sponsor one of our shows, or just start with a 30-second ad, IBJ Media can help. Contact advertise at ibj.com to learn more.
Governor Mike Braun warned Wednesday that teachers who post online in celebration of political violence could face suspension or even revocation of their professional licenses. IIB's Marek Mazurek has more.
Braun's comments followed the assassination of Charlie Kirk, a prominent conservative activist who was killed at a college speaking event in Utah last week. The Republican governor said disagreements on political issues, quote, should never lead to the type of horrific tragedy we witnessed last week, end quote. Braun said while the First Amendment must be protected, calls for political violence, quote, are not freedom of speech and should not be tolerated, end quote. Braun emphasized that Indiana's Secretary of Education has the authority to suspend or revoke a license for misconduct, and the office will review reported statements of K-12 teachers and administrators who have made statements to celebrate or incite political violence. David Keating is the president of the Institute for Free Speech. He said Braun's threat raises, quote, serious constitutional concerns. He noted Indiana law typically ties license revocations to criminal acts or serious misconduct. He also pushed back on Braun's claim that calls for political violence are not freedom of speech. It remains unclear whether any license reviews are already underway in Indiana. The IDOE maintains a public database of educators who have been disciplined, most often for criminal convictions. As of Thursday, no license suspensions or revocations had been recorded in that database since August 25th. I'm Marek Mazurek for Inside Indiana Business Radio.
Subaru of Indiana Automotive has produced the final Subaru Legacy model as it moves forward with a previously announced shift in vehicle production at the Lafayette plant. The Legacy was the first Subaru model designed for the American market and was the first to be manufactured in the U.S. at the Lafayette facility in 1989. In May, Subaru of America announced plans to cease production of the Legacy, ending a 36-year run that produced about 1.4 million vehicles. The changes are being made as SIA transitions to begin U.S. production of the Subaru Forester next month, followed by the Forester Hybrid next spring. The Indiana Utility Regulatory Commission is poised to rule on a bold proposal from Northern Indiana Public Service Company that would have major ramifications on large load projects in the utility's coverage area. In a petition filed with the IURC earlier this year, NIPSCO is proposing to create a subsidiary called GenCo, specifically designed to negotiate with and provide power to data centers. If the petition is approved, GenCo would be allowed to negotiate rates with developers without IURC oversight, which has drawn criticism from opponents, including Shaw Friedman, an attorney for the LaPorte County Commissioners.
I don't blame NIPSCO management for attempting to pitch this. It's up to the regulators, though, to do their job and to say, no, we're not going to allow you to embark on a highly risky, largely unregulated subsidiary that poses some real risk to average ratepayers.
A ruling on NIPSCO's petition is expected by the end of the month. Indiana Fever legend Tamika Catchings is this week's guest on the Business and Beyond podcast with Gary Dick, presented by PNC, a weekly conversation with high-profile Hoosiers in business, sports, and entertainment, and beyond. Available now on the IBJ Media app or your favorite podcast provider. I'm Alex Brown for Inside Indiana Business Radio on Demand.
Indiana's biggest names, their most personal stories. The Business and Beyond podcast brings you one-on-one conversations with the state's top leaders in business, sports, politics, and culture. If you want to know what makes Indiana tick, this is your show. Subscribe and listen wherever you get your podcasts or at ibjpodcasts.com.
Your commute just got smarter. Turn drive time into growth time. The IBJ Media Podcast Network gives you front row access to leaders shaping Indiana's economy, culture, and future. No filler, just smart, relevant, local storytelling you won't get anywhere else. Find all of our shows by searching IBJ Media in your podcast app or visit ibjpodcasts.com.